So let's go ahead and get started on the dryer housing. First, we're going to start on the XY plane creating a 2D sketch. What we're going to do is draw the basic profile or half of that profile, which consists of basically a circle, your vertical line, horizontal line, and then a horizontal line on the top, and use your dimension command to lay out the dimensions. The book does suggest using auto dimension, but I'm kind of a creature of habit, so I just usually use the dimension command because that's just the first thing that comes to mind. So what I'm doing here is just sketching out the basic geometry, using the trim command, trimming away the stuff I don't want. I'm going to make this 1.5 inches right here. Once I do that 1.5 inches, the drawing changes proportionally, and now I can put a 2-inch radius on this part here. Now I'm going to use the fillet command. Remember that you are able to use the fillet command in both the 2D and the 3D. So with the 2D fillet, we're going to specify the radius, pick the two edges that we're going to use the fillet, and that's going to be a 0.25 radius, and that's going to go ahead and give us that curved shape when we complete this. So now we're going to move into using the revolve command, just like we did in the last chapter. We've got the revolve, we've got the profile, and we're going to select this as the axis. When we select this as the axis, we're going to use that axis to rotate this part 360. All right, select the axis, go ahead and hit OK, and we are done with that. So hopefully you'll see that the quickness of that. So let's move on to creating the planes. Now we're going to offset the work planes that off of the original XY plane. The book asks you to offset one that's 2.5 inches, 3.5 inches, and then 4.25. So we're just using our offset from plane command, laying out those planes, and we're getting ready to create a sketch on each one of those planes in just a second. To get those laid out, what we're going to do next is we're going to create a sketch on the original XY plane. I always like to use the slice graphics for just slicing the part in half. The book does suggest using the wireframe, and that's, I'll use that as well. But to start this off, I like to just start off with the slice graphics and draw the rectangle that I need for this part. So what we're going to do is start, this is going to be the first profile of the handle. It's going to be 1.5 inches wide and 1/2 inch tall. So as we can go through the next few sketches, we're going to make sure that the right side is always lining up on the right side of that rectangle. We're going to add a 1/4 inch fillet to the top of this, and that's going to complete that sketch. So now I'm going to just go ahead and switch over to the wireframe so you can see that. You can see where we're starting. And remember, the whole purpose of this, what we're doing right here, is to be able to create 4 sketches. You can see that they're going to have, well, it's going to be sketch 2, sketch 3, sketch 4, and sketch 5. We're going to use those sketches in order to create the loft, and that's going to give that contour handle that we're looking for. So we've got to create those sketches because those are the components that are needed in order for the loft command. So this is kind of the groundwork. What I'm doing here is just using the right side and specifying that new rectangle at 1.4 width, maintaining the 1/2 inch tall, and then finish this off with a 1/4 inch fillet. And you can choose to dimension this yourself, or you can use the auto dimension. I typically just use the right dimension this either as I'm going along, or I just use the dimension command to place the dimensions on the part. So let's move over to the next sketch. We'll create another sketch on the next work plane, and we'll specify the next portion of the handle. So this is where part of the handle comes in. This is where it gets to the smallest dimension. This is a 1.2 for the length, maintaining a 1/2 inch tall, and then also maintaining the 1/4 inch radius. So here I'm using the auto dimension, but because I have already specified the radius, the fillet for that, the radius was already put on there and there were no dimensions missing. So I can finish the sketch and then move on to the last sketch. This is the last part of the handle for the dryer housing. So this one is going to have a little bit larger length for that, and that's going to be a 1.35 dimension. And then all of the other dimension are going to be consistent as the other sketches. All right, so we're going to finish this off, finishing up with the fillet. From here, we're going to be moving over into the loft command. This does go pretty quickly because we've already done all of the groundwork. So all of those sketches are needed for the components for the loft. So make sure you have finished all of those sketches and you'll be ready to go to the next step. All right, so let's go ahead and pick each one of those sketches, 1, 2, 3, 4. Notice how those all connect together. Hit the OK button and you just generated your handle. So I'm going to go back and turn the view back to our standard, the standard view for this to make it a little bit easier to see. So there we go. That's the beginning of our dryer housing. Hopefully yours looks the same. If not, go back and check those sketches and make sure that you laid out the handle and keeping that right side in the right direction. So now we're going to use the YZ plane. We're going to once again go in and I use the slice graphics. I'm going to create a new sketch on here and we're going to lay out the little profile. So the way the book said to do this was just to go ahead and start with drawing just a general line. This line that we're going to draw, we're going to pick the midpoint of the line when we use the arc center point. So what we're going to do is we need to find the midpoint of that line that we've drawn. So if you right click and go to snap points, click on the midpoint, you're going to be able to get the middle of that line. So we're going to pick the start point and then the end point of the arc. After we do this, we're going to specify the dimensions. So we haven't had to, we just, creating the basic sketch right now, and now we're going to apply the dimensions. So add a 0.75 for the arc, and we're going to locate this 1.125 from the edge. And because I was already on the bottom, I don't need to specify that horizontal line with a location of 0 because that's where we started that. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to extrude this part of the dryer out 5.5 inches. So I'm going to switch back to the wireframe so I can see that sketch before I'm going over into the extrusion. So here, just make sure you've got the extrusion going in the right direction. Typically, I can pick on that arrow and pull it over to change the direction, but for some odd reason, I was having a hard time getting to that arrow. So I just started over and then just used the arrows here on the dialog box and change the direction. So make sure we got that set up at 5.5 inches, and that's going to be the end of that extrusion. So moving on to the next